Well, hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's Mark Fitzpatrick from Tiger Club of Kansas City. Welcome to our Zoom meeting for Tuesday, November 24th. Our special guest today, voice of the Tigers, Mike Kelly. Before we get to Mike, a few housekeeping notes. We'd like to encourage you again this Thanksgiving season to give to Harvesters, which the club has supported for a number of years. You can go on their website at harvesters.org and contribute to help them feed the hungry in Kansas City. I'd also like to give a shout out to our sponsors, Chicken and Pickle, Sports Scene in Lee Summit, and Conrad's in Liberty. We really appreciate their support of the club. Thanks to Darren Wydick for handling all the technological features of the Zoom meetings. And of course, Paul Blackman and Barry Cantor for lining up our guests each week. Everything's run very smoothly in 2020. I am delighted to welcome a guy that I call a legend, Mike Kelly. Mike, I was doing some math. This is your 30th year of basketball for Mizzou and 27th of football. Is that correct?
That would be correct, my friend. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you and now a member of the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame. You're inducted a few years ago, and you really do a great job. And really, it's great. It's always comforting when the football and basketball seasons start to hear the voice of Mike Kelly bringing us all the action on the court and on the football field.
Well, you're very kind. I've been very fortunate, very blessed, very lucky to be in the position as long as I have been. Certainly still enjoy it. Even in these times when things can change in a moment, as we found out yesterday afternoon. So grateful. I think we all just have to be grateful that we have games, and certainly then flexible in terms of what the COVID virus is going to provide each and every week for us. And so I credit the SEC. I think Greg Sankey and his leadership team have done a terrific job implementing a flex scheduling position like they did just a couple of weeks ago, to be able to step in and allow Missouri to play an opponent this weekend, and to give Missouri the opportunity to get to a 10-game season. So I just think for a variety of different ways, we should all be thankful despite, what we see going on around us.
Let's talk a little about the South Carolina game. I didn't know what to expect after having 2 weeks off, or had not playing a game in 21 days. And then South Carolina fires Will Muschamp. Never know how that's going to affect the game. Tigers came out really sharp the first half. I was getting ready to have my celebratory beer at the end of the third quarter, but things really tightened up. It was an interesting game, but in the end, a solid win, I thought.
It's like Gary Pinkel used to always say, we as fans always want to have that popcorn in hand and be chilling, midway through the third quarter and enjoying a cocktail because the game's in hand. But, it's a 60-minute affair. And, before I talk about Missouri, I credit Mike Bobo. I really do. Made an adjustment at halftime, changed quarterbacks, gave Missouri's defense a different look with a change of pace, with a dual threat guy. I say that because there are no guarantees that Mike Bobo is going to be at the University of South Carolina next year in any capacity. There are no guarantees where his coaching staff, or that staff that remains that was hired by Will Muschamp, where they're going to be. I mean, and so they're dealing with not only the uncertainty of their future, but then also trying to keep a football team together, and keeping a team together where, let's face it, you had some selfishness early in the week. Some guys that decided it was about them, not about the team, and so they opted out. A credit to the kids that stayed, a credit to the coaching staff. They fought, and they fought for 60 minutes. But it's a good win for Missouri. Anytime you can win on the road, it's a good win. Any win is a good win. Candidly, it's not a game that I think that Missouri may have won a couple of years ago. But I like the way that, led by senior leaders, that Missouri found a way to do what they needed to do. They got stops in important situations, and I think probably what you saw from an offensive standpoint, particularly in the second half, was some changes up front that Carolina made defensively, and some young offensive linemen that were seeing things for the first time. But at the end of the day, time of possession, being able to put together some drives, even though you weren't able to score in the second half, it's still a very solid win. And 6 games in, you're 3-3 with a chance to win, 3, maybe 4. Let's see what happens as the season shakes out. And so, it was good to come home with a victory.
Guy I want to talk about who's really stood out the whole season is Nick Bolton. I feel like he's playing like a first-team All-American. The guy is literally all over the field. He never seems to get tired. And I know he played hurt during the season, but what a season he's having. Now, he could come back next year, but you think he'll go in the draft?
Well, I think he's positioned himself quite well, through the first 6 games. And, you pray that he continues to stay healthy. He's one of those guys that the coaches tell you limits the distractions in his life and focuses on trying to become the best player that he can be each and every week. And certainly you see that. I mean, he is he's just a fun guy to watch play the game. It's been, for me, fun to spend moments of time with him over the last few years and getting a chance to know him. I finally had a chance to meet his mom and dad. We were flying back from Florida and got to meet them in the airport in Gainesville before we headed back. And just terrific people. And so he's really good. And his ability to read and his ability to understand a lot of times before the ball is snapped, what's going to happen is very impressive. A lot of that goes back to his film study and things like that. And so, I would be surprised if Nick Bolton is back next year, just based on the body of work that he's had to this point in time.
Folks, remember to keep your lines muted. Also, if you have a question for Mike at the end of our discussion, we will ask it. You can use the chat feature to post those questions. Mike, my other player of the game on Saturday was punter Grant McInnes. I think he had 2 at the 1-yard line, and the average field position for South Carolina was, I think, the 12-yard line. He really was outstanding.
He was, and it's his job to flip the field, right? To be able to hopefully pin the defense or pin the offense back and give the defense, the opportunity to perhaps get a safety or things like that. And he's an interesting story in that he made the most of his opportunity to go elsewhere. He was the punter at Kentucky. He was beaten out by Max Duffy, the best punter in the country, a year ago. And found an opportunity, came to Columbia, and was very, very good and instrumental in Missouri getting a win on Saturday.
I had a lot of questions ready for you to talk about the Missouri-Arkansas rival game. It's had some real juice to it this year, but instead we're going to play Vanderbilt. So what's that done to your preparation for the week?
Well, it's funny. I got a phone call from someone about –
Let's make sure you mute your lines, please. All right, Mike, you with us? Mike, you're muted now.
I got muted.
Okay. You started to say you had a phone call.
No, I got a phone call. I was working on Arkansas notes and got a phone call about 3:45. Said that this is possible, and I said, "Well, it'll figure. I'll get done with them, and then we'll find out." And sure enough, right at 5 o'clock, I was finishing up just my initial set of notes, and got the phone call that it was going to be announced at 5:30 that we're playing Vanderbilt instead. And so, to me, there's intrigue on both sides. Anytime you get a chance to play, it's a great opportunity. Vanderbilt's 0-7 on the season, but if Missouri was scheduled to play them in week 4, and if you go back to week 4, I just finished doing Vanderbilt notes when we found out that game was going to be postponed. So I had a template done. It gave me an opportunity to look back and through 3 games where they are now through 7 games. From an offensive standpoint, they're throwing for more than 100 yards per game, more than they did in the first 3 weeks of the season. Their total offense is up more than 100 yards per game over the course of the last 4 weeks. Now defensively, they've continued to give up yardage and points. I think they're giving up about 36 points a game. But we were talking about maybe those two guys who used to be here coming to Columbia from Arkansas. Well, the interesting thing about Saturday is the defensive coordinator at Vanderbilt was the defensive coordinator at Appalachian State a year ago with Eli Drinkwitz. So Ted Roof, a longtime veteran in this business, is the defensive coordinator at Vandy, and that adds, I think, a little bit of a mix to the game. And but at the end of the day, I think Mizzou will be ready to play. I think they'll be well prepared, and let's not lose sight of the fact that Missouri is getting healthy. Larry Borum made the trip to South Carolina, wasn't in uniform, but in an emergency situation could have perhaps been called to action. Xavier Delgado is a guy that could have, in an emergency situation, played last week. They're both healthy. That's exciting. Kobe Whitesides is getting healthy. He's back in the two deep this week. And so through all of this, stop and go and adversity, we're seeing guys starting to get healthy. And certainly that bodes well for this team for the rest of the season.
Vandy has a freshman quarterback named Ken Seals. I watched the first half of their game against Florida. They were very, very competitive. And as we learned last year, we can't take them for granted by any means. But Seals has already broken Jay Cutler's freshman passing record. So they've got some talent.
They do. He's young. You look at the numbers. He's got 10 touchdown passes on the season, 9 interceptions. He's completing, about 65% of his passes. And so, can Missouri disrupt that? Can Missouri continue the momentum of back-to-back games now with takeaways on the defensive side, interceptions in back-to-back games? And, I look at the game against Florida too, Mark, and I candidly, I ask myself, how locked in were the Gators? We're going to a winless Vanderbilt team. We've locked up the SEC East for all practical purposes. How locked in were the Gators for that game? But as we found a year ago, and as Gary Pinkel, to his credit, said from day one when he took over this program, Missouri is not good enough to overlook anyone. And so I think that this team will be, I think they'll be locked in and ready to play no matter who the opponent is.
I've enjoyed listening to your Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast, if I can give you a little plug there. One thing I've really noticed is you have a great rapport with Coach Drinkwitz, and it seems like with the entire coaching staff as well. You really like this group of fellas.
Mark, I thought about this and have been thinking about this for a number of weeks. And, when you sit down with these individuals, and COVID robbed us all of the opportunity to build relationships with this new coaching staff prior to the season starting. Normally we would have had the opportunity to watch spring ball. That was ripped away. Normally we would have had interaction with them through events during the course of the summer months. That opportunity was ripped away. As I sat back and as the season was moving forward, I mean, they had enough to deal with. The last person they needed to worry about was me. And so, I knew that we'd get opportunities to sit down with the coaches and with Coach Drink as the season progressed. I mean, top to bottom, I have been so thoroughly impressed on Thursday nights with each individual that has come in and sat down with us on Tiger Talk. I mean, just very, very impressive guys that, are really have different backgrounds, but guys that are really grounded, guys that are not only committed to Drink and to his program, but guys that are committed to the young men that they're around each and every day. And the other thing too, Mark, that I think I'd like to share is, as the season got underway and during the preseason, I was given the opportunity to go to practice, and given the ability to pretty much make my way around the practice fields and watch the individual position groups work out. And I can't tell you how impressed I was with the level of teaching and the manner in which the game was being taught by this coaching staff. I think it's an awfully, awfully impressive group. And I think that it's a group that probably has some guys that are going to get a chance to, they're going to get a chance to run their own program eventually. So, kudos to Jim Sturck and the job that he did in bringing Coach Drinkwitz to Missouri, but also kudos to Drink and his ability to put together a staff.
Again, don't forget to listen to Mike on Tiger Talk, and that's on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast, which you can subscribe to through all the normal channels. Mike, let's turn to basketball. Tigers tip off tomorrow night against Oral Roberts. Conzo Martin has a veteran team. What do you think is going to happen this year?
Well, I think one thing that football has shown us, Mark, is because of the starts and stops and the adversity caused by the virus, veteran teams and teams that have veteran leadership at key positions, and I just think about the quarterback position in football, those are the teams that are successful. This is the most experienced Missouri team returning since, I think, Derek Chivas' senior year. I think that's the number. They have been through a variety of different things, adversity, obstacles, wars, if you will, in the Southeastern Conference. I can't help to think that experience is going to bode well for them, particularly in a season where there's going to be uncertainty. I mean, each and every day, and we read something different from, with the start of the game, supposed to be start of college basketball season, supposed to be tomorrow. Look at the teams that were supposed to go to Mohegan Sun, and a couple have had to pull out because of positive tests. And the same with the MTE event in South Dakota. And we've seen other programs that have had to shut down. And if you've got a veteran group that's been through it before, I just think you handle it better. I'm intrigued. I haven't a chance to watch them play yet, under full disclosure. Looking forward to that coming up on Wednesday evening, but I'm anxious to see what Drew Buggs adds to this team. I'm anxious to see, can Jeremiah Tillman continue to stay on the basketball court and continue to improve from an offensive standpoint and also from a defensive standpoint. I'm intrigued to see, does Mark Smith and does Torrance Watson, how well do they shoot the ball from the perimeter? What has Mitchell Smith added to his game? What about Drew Smith? I mean, so I think there's a lot of different components that I'm anxious to see how it unfolds. How have how has a Kobe Brown changed? Is he a different player from a maturity standpoint after having a year under his belt? And so everything that you hear and talking to people that have watched practice say that they're very competitive practices, that, they feel very, very good about the number of people that can come in and step in and play different roles. And so I'm anxious to see it unfold.
Talk about how your broadcast life has changed with COVID. I know you're not going to do the away games in person in basketball. You are doing all football games in person, though, right?
Yeah, the change in football is that before we would be on the team charter, and now we're flying commercial. And so, for instance, to go to Tennessee, Chris and Scotty Cox and Matt Weingartner and myself shuttled from Columbia on Norm Rubling's MoX, and we got to and met Howard there, and then flew actually from St. Louis to Charlotte into Knoxville. For Florida, we flew out of Columbia, Dallas, and then into Gainesville. And then, last week it was again a shuttle to St. Louis, and then to Chicago, then to Columbia, South Carolina on United. But that's the way it's changed for us. Is just it's a longer travel schedule, right? So, we left the hotel Sunday morning at 4 a.m. Central Time, and I walked into my house at 2:30 in the afternoon, Sunday afternoon. So that's just a little different. Basketball, because the SEC has deemed radio broadcasters as super spreaders, we're not allowed to fly on team charters, and we're not allowed to be or have access to visiting arenas. And that's fine. I mean, if you're trying to protect the bubble, as much as you possibly can. I completely understand that. And so, it's just in basketball, what we're going to do is there's a Mizzou Sports Properties offices are located in the Hearn Center. We do the podcast each and every week from a converted office that they've turned into a studio. And so Chris and I and our engineer Matt Weingartner will sit there, we'll watch the road games off of TV or off of a feed from ESPN or whoever is the producer of the game that night. And then we'll do the game in that manner. The home engineers for radio will be sending audio feeds to the road broadcasters. And so they have natural sound and also the effects feeds and things like that.
We're talking to Mike Kelly, the voice of the Missouri Tigers for going on 3 decades now. Again, if you'd like to ask him a question, we'll get started with that in a little bit. Please use the chat feature of the Zoom call. Mike, I want to talk a little about your career. It's been a great one. I always loved the story you told about Jack Buck telling you how to call a game when you were first starting out. My father-in-law met you one time. He's your biggest fan at 92. And he always tells that story over and over again. Would you share that with everybody?
Well, there are a couple of them. Jack, as people remember in 91 and 92, I had done color with Tom Dorr during the 90-91 season. And then Tom left to go to the Chicago Bulls. And so I was given the opportunity by Joe Castiglione and Roger Gardner of Learfield, the opportunity to play-by-play. And Joe Buck was my first color analyst. Jack used to refer to the two of us as the two fledglings. When are you two fledglings going to begin your career? And I'd suggest that one of us is still fledgling. The other one's had a pretty good career for himself. But, he also used to say, he said, call the play. Nobody cares what you think about the officials because you're not one. Nobody cares about what you think about the play calling because you're not one. Call the play. That's what the listener wants. And so I've tried to abide by that mandate from a guy who obviously I had the pleasure to work with and had tremendous respect with and grew up listening to. And so that's the way it's been. People complain about officiating. I try not to because they've got a difficult job and because they know their job better than I know their job. So, the one time I may complain about the officials, and it was evident Saturday night, is the number of times that once a flag is thrown that they have to take time to get together to decipher what exactly took place before we actually hear exactly what the call is. And so I think that could be a little bit more efficient in the way they do things.
One other thing you've done in your career is you used to host a Cardinals show with Bob Gibson years ago. We lost Bob not long ago. When I was growing up, he was my favorite pitcher. What a competitor. What was Bob like off the field?
Oh my gosh. He was fun. He was genuine. He was very, very kind to me. And, I was 26 years old when Robert Hyland hired me at KMOX. And when he told me that, my first year in St. Louis, I was going to be doing Cardinal postgame shows with the great Bob Gibson. And Bob could not have been a more gentle, kinder soul to me that I didn't know nearly, 1/10 of what he knew about baseball, 1% of what he knew about baseball. And we'd sit there after Cardinal games, home and road, and we'd take phone calls. And he was tremendous. He was playful. I can remember sitting on an airplane I think it was in 90. Because I was flying from St. Louis to Omaha to do a Missouri Creighton game. And it's early. I'm on the plane. I'm sitting in my seat, and someone put this big hand on top of my head and started squeezing. And I thought they were going to pinch the top of my head off of my neck. And I look up, and it's Bob Gibson, and he's laughing. And it's been, for Cardinal fans, it's been a tough couple of months because you lost two great ones in Lou Brock and who also was terrific, and certainly Bob. And so, Mark, it goes back to what I told you. I've been blessed. I've been really, really lucky to work with some really, really good people.
Did Bob ever tell you what he would tell Tim McCarver when he would try to come out and talk to him on the mound?
Yeah, go back and sit down because I know about this. I know more about this than you do. So, and I'm paraphrasing, but there are more colorful ways in which Bob distributed that message. He and I did a show from Mike Shannon's restaurant. I used to host Live at Shannon's on Friday and Saturday night with Mike after Cardinal baseball, and on one of Mike's birthdays, Mike decided that he and I and Bob and Mike Claiborne should go over to a place called I think it's called the Oz on the East Side over in Sauget. It was a dance club at the time, and so we jump into Mike Shannon's Suburban, and literally, I don't know that the wheels touched the ground going across the Poplar Street Bridge. We were going at that much of a speed. And we get to the place and pull in, and as we're walking in, Gibson puts his arm around my neck and kind of squeezes it and says, "Listen, if you leave me here, I will kill you." And I said, "No problem." And so literally about 30 minutes in, he looked at me and gave me the thumbs out. And so we grabbed a cab and headed back downtown. But no, he was a wonderful man, wonderful competitor, and a guy that's missed by a number of people.
Before we get to some questions, Mike, I going to ask you, have you had the opportunity to talk to Coach Stewart recently?
It's been a couple of months, and I'm glad you brought it up because I need to reach out to him. I had to call him, about a month and a half ago, I guess it's been now, to tell him that Lou Henson had passed, and that kind of touched him a little bit because those are his contemporaries, right? And so. But I did talk to Vonda Cordes, who's the administrative assistant for football, who had talked to Norman, Virginia, just I think like a week earlier, and said that he was doing great. And I know Susan McNay stays in great contact with him, and so I need to reach out to him, if anything else, just to wish him happy Thanksgiving.
We also lost Billy Tubbs this year, another way.
Yeah, doggone it. Yeah.
Tough year. Hey, let's get to some questions. First of all, we need to hear, with the offense struggling in the last two games, are you surprised we haven't seen some packages for Sean Robinson?
No, and candidly, I look at the depth chart and he's not even listed this week. So I know he was contact traced and wasn't available at South Carolina. So he was one of the guys out. It's Connor Bazelak's the quarterback. He's the quarterback of the future. Brady Cook is coming on. I just think that Sean is somewhat one-dimensional, in terms of his ability to run an offense. So I'm not really, and I think honestly that the issues that Missouri's had offensively go up to inexperience in the offensive line, and I think that's that's why it's the greatest team sport, right? Because it's incumbent upon 11 positions to do their job effectively for ultimate success. And I think you've seen some young guys that literally are drinking water out of a fire hose right now up front on the offensive line. And thank goodness for Michael Maietti and for Case Cook and their ability to stay healthy and stay in games.
Was the Arkansas switch brought about due to Arkansas player deficiency, or was it due to the SEC office wanting to shuffle the schedule to have more attractive TV games available the rest of the season? That's a long question.
I like that.
No, that's Darren. Darren shared from Coach Drink's press conference. Mizzou had no new positive tests on Sunday, says the team should get some guys back to practice today. Roster that they've submitted has 59 scholarship players, and that does not include Borum, Delgado, and Jeffcoat. Says we'll see on them. Looks like we're getting healthy.
Yeah, it does. And the crazy thing is the number of tests. And again, these guys are all being tested 3 times a week, right? So just do the math in your head, the number of players in the program and coaches and things like that, and the limited number of positive tests that have come back. And when you've had a number of guys out, it hasn't because everybody's positive, it's because of the contact tracing that's taking place. I don't think that these young men are getting enough credit for being as irresponsible and as mature as they have been throughout the course of this season. And not only that, Mark, but going back into the summer. I mean, think about it. We all were college students, right? And they were told back in the summer months that they had to behave differently than they normally would have because of trying to maintain a level of safety and things like that. And I just think that to me, it speaks volumes to the leadership in the program. Certainly the coaches led by Coach Drinkwitz, but also by the veteran players that lead this roster, and understanding that as a group, there's a certain way that they have to account of themselves to be able to put themselves in a position to play each week. And candidly, I don't know that they're getting enough credit for being as responsible as they've been.
What is your favorite venue to call a game in the SEC besides Mizzou?
Love the trip to Bryant-Denny. Certainly enjoy Neyland Stadium. Rupp is Rupp. It's just an old barn, but it's fun to do a game there because of the history of the building and because it's always packed. So those would be a few.
Remote play-by-play and analysis aren't the same as on-site, but all things considered, it hasn't been bad. For cost reasons, you think remote might become more prevalent after the pandemic is over?
It's a good question. I know, for instance, the Cardinals will do more spring training baseball this year than they've ever done, but none of their announcers will be in Florida as they have been in years past. The pandemic has proven that technology works, as evidenced by what we're doing today. From a play-by-play standpoint, I'm quite confident we could do games remotely and do them well. The one thing that you lose because you're relying on the program feed, couple different options, right? Some like the high 22, which is a high camera overlooking the field, but you don't have the ability to zoom in on the action. So it's hard to tell. It's like literally, calling out license plate from the highest hotel in Kansas City as cars are driving by. But when you have the program feed, you lose depth perception in terms of being able to see the entire field. So I think football is a little bit more difficult to call remotely than basketball, because if the camera, the program feed zooms in on the runner, you lose the ability to see where the yard markers are. Basketball is a little bit different. I think we'll be fine with that. But yeah, I think in this day and age, because of these times, because of the financial implications, that everybody is going to look operationally and make the best decisions from a fiscal standpoint that makes sense for each entity.
On basketball games, will you have access to all of the cameras on the feed?
I think it's a great question, and I'm not sure yet. Still being decided. I know the way that the SEC network is set up is that there's fiber optic cable on every campus in the league. So if Missouri is playing at Georgia, we need a fiber optic feed from the truck in Athens or from the arena in Athens to Charlotte, and then they patch it to Mizzou Arena, and then it'll be patched over to us in the Hearn Center. And then we'll be able to have the feed that way. Will we get multiple angles? I think probably we will, as I'm thinking through it as we're speaking. So it's just one of those things we'll have to, we'll just have to figure that out.
Question: when one cuts the cable cord, is there a subscription available for the SEC network? I think you just go through the ESPN app, don't you, to do that?
Yeah, I think it's the ESPN Plus app, I think, is where you have to go. And I think there's, what is that? I'm not sure what the cost is.
On my smart TV, it was free. So
was it? Okay, yeah.
I think, and then you can get the alternate network on there too.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I don't think I have any connections, but all right, you like this one. Tyus Edney, 5 downs, Burt Cohn, 3 knife stabs in my body that I somehow survived. Comments. We can throw the flea kicker in there too. Probably.
Yeah, the one pass that Matt Davidson should have never caught in his Nebraska career. And, several years afterwards, Matt started doing color on football and basketball. And so I had a chance to have that conversation with him and Charles Johnson. I've told him many times that he was down at the 1 yard line, and
He won't admit that, will he?
well, he actually, kind of just looks at me and smiles. They were doing the last time Colorado visited Columbia, they were doing a kind of a recap of that. And I was down on the field prior to the game and walked over and said, no, this is where you're down right here. And we just kind of laughed. The Edney thing, the thing I'll always remember is that, Missouri scores on a putback by Julian Winfield, 4.8 seconds to go. I said, oh, baby, I love this tournament. We go to a timeout, and as we threw it to break, Jim Kennedy was doing the games with me, and we both wrote the same thing down. Too much time. And as Edney proved, it was too much time. And, I remember Norm Stewart after the game saying that he had told Kendrick Moore, Jason, you've got Edney, Kendrick Moore, you just play middle, center field, whatever way Edney goes. If you turn him one time, the game's over. While the ball's inbounded to Tyus Edney, he comes up the sideline. Kendrick, instead of going to get a stop, starts chasing too. And so now you got two players chasing, and then he goes behind the back at half court and leaves Derek Grimm in no man's land. And the ball, literally, there was a picture where the ball was maybe that far over the fingertips of Derek Grimm when it went in. It was, ultimately, what it is, Mark? It's kids making plays.
Right.
And that kid made a play.
Unfortunately, we see it every year on the NCAA tournament highlights. It's amazing that people call that a layup. I read that was no layup. It was over a guy who was 6'10" with his arms up. We noticed your right hand's bandaged up. Are you okay?
2 weeks ago, I had surgery to have two knuckles replaced on my right hand because of arthritis in my right hand. I broke my hand in multiple spots several years ago, and the index knuckle and the middle knuckle both had to be replaced. And so I'm dealing with the recovery. I think I'll be in this little device until I think January. So yeah. So thanks for asking. But yeah, doing fine. And one knuckle was described as mush. The other one I had was completely cracked down into the index or into the middle finger and had a divot on the other side. And so it was somewhat painful, and it's good to be pain-free.
All right. Well, take care of yourself.
Thank
One thing before we wrap up, 30 years, I want to say your call of the final play at the LSU, I've listened to many times, really was a great call. What is out of 3 decades of doing Mizzou sports, what's your favorite memory?
I can't pin it down to one. I can't. It's too hard. Missouri's first win over Nebraska in 25 years was pretty special. Yeah. Missouri beating Texas A&M to lock up a spot in the SEC championship game was pretty special. Missouri going to Nebraska and routing the Cornhuskers with Jeremy Macklin and Chase Daniel in that group was spectacular. Eli Drinkwitz' win over defending national champion was pretty special. We don't beat defending national champs on a continuum, at Mizzou. Being within an eyelash on 2 occasions of going to the Final Four, 3 occasions, memorable. UConn, Oklahoma, and certainly, I think back to the UCLA game, because I think if you beat UCLA, you beat Mississippi State, and I think that team would go to the Final Four. So, but it's more than games, Mark. It really is. And Larry Roundtree just did something this weekend that put him as the most productive running back in the history of Missouri, bypassing Zach Abram. And I think of Larry Roundtree, and I think of the personality and getting a chance to get to know that young man. And I think of Zach Abram. And here was a kid that when he showed up at the campus as a freshman would walk with his head down constantly. And by the time he was a senior, he was making eye contact, and that smile that was memorable was apparent every time that you were around him. And so it's the relationships. It's it's watching young men or young kids grow to men. Chase Daniel put together this Zoom call for the food bank of Central and Northeast Missouri during the pandemic early. And having a chance to see guys from that 07 team who you thought, man, those are pretty good guys. And then you look years later, and not only were they good guys, they were great young men who became really, really good husbands, great fathers, and have done, terrific things in their lives. And so it's the full body, right? It's not just the games.
We have one other question. Who's the most memorable interview you have ever done in your career?
Norm Stewart will always be, he used to tell me before games, now Mike asked me if there's anything that I want to talk about before the game. Okay, coach, great. And invariably, the number of times where I said, hey, coach, what about this? Because this is something he told me to bring up. And the number of times where he hooked me in and, yeah, Mike, I don't know why you'd ask me that. I have no interest in talking about something like that. Those are things that, obviously will stand out. I mean, how blessed is it that, you've had a chance to be around people like that. And Pinkle is a guy that, he lives now that I've moved back to Columbia, he's 2 doors down, right? So I see him quite often. And, for this guy that had this demeanor as this demanding, hard-nosed competitor, I will tell you in less than a week, there will be about an 8 to 10 foot blown up Christmas teddy bear sitting on his front yard. So I call him Coach TB, Coach Teddy Bear now.
Somebody asked, when's your book coming out?
I'm not going to do a book. I'm not a writer. I just don't, I couldn't do it justice. And so, it's just no plans for one, but I appreciate the question.
Well, all right, Mike, Mizzou fans are blessed to have you as the voice of the Tigers. You're a true treasure, and taking your day to come visit with us, we really appreciate it. And hope next time we see you, we're sharing a flea market burger together.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. And thinking about Joe, but Mark, Missouri's blessed to have fans like the people that are on this call, right? And because this is the group, like others around the state, that you're never going to be there, no matter what the circumstances are. And so, you have been a friend for 30 years, and I certainly, appreciate your friendship. Paul's been a guy that I've been around on multiple occasions. He's been a friend for a long time, and I'm blessed to get to know all of you all and to be able to spend some time with all of you all. And so I hope everybody has a wonderful, happy Thanksgiving. I hope that everybody stays healthy and stays healthy and stays safe, and also remembers to say a prayer at night for those healthcare workers that are doing such a fantastic job.
Yeah, Mike, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Folks, next week we'll have Joe Walljasper, former sports editor of the Columbia Tribune, now contributor to PowerMizzou.com, and one of the most tuned in guys about Mizzou sports that's out there. I'd like to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. And again, please stay safe. Please spread the word about these Zoom calls. We had a good attendance today, and you can also watch them rebroadcast on our YouTube channel starting tomorrow. So go to kctigerclub.com, renew those club memberships. And again, everybody have a happy Thanksgiving, and please stay safe. Mike, thanks again. Have a great week, everyone.
All right, you too. Take care. MIZ.
COU.